So I'm going to start with the part where Miss Megan Fox began her video with, which is debating about whether eukaryotes existed then and why are they the same as they are now. They first started as prokaryotes, which were single-celled organisms such as bacteria, which still exist today because of certain circumstances in terms of which ones evolved in terms of natural selection and mutations, and the specific environmental places in which they needed to survive. So if there is no need to change, you will stay the same. Here we have prokaryotes, which are a little bit more advanced, and this is sort of what makes up all the DNA. Consists of the cell's DNA and other specialized components, such as the mitochondria, the Golgi apparatus, certain things that allow the cell to be a little bit more complex. Here's the mitochondria. It allows for a little bit more advanced life form to come into place. Evolution is not that everything has to evolve. Evolution is that two things are the same and then they split. One continues on to be the same, such as prokaryotes, the single-celled organisms that we're talking about here, and others go to become eukaryotes. So therefore, the argument that this is invalid or fake or invalidated is not necessarily true, because you can actually test these things. And then in terms of scientific procedures, one can be looking at radiometric dating in terms of looking at the sediment and the types of organisms that were there, how old they are. It did say around 2.5 billion years ago, and maybe the reason why they can say that is because scientists have gone through the radiometric dating procedure and found that the half-life of that particular rock or fossil, and therefore been able to trace it back to the amount of years, or estimate the amount of years old that this fossil is. And I really wish that she would have gone and looked at this evolution of sex, because it really explains my point exactly. So if this organism, for example, reproduces asexually, and the advantage is that you can reproduce more quickly, and then there's no mate required, and the entirety of your DNA is passed on into your offsprings. However, because of the offspring, let's just read it, because the offspring all have the same DNA, they all have the same chances of survival. If a change in the environment is fatal to one, it may be fatal to all. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of the environment. Through natural selection, through sexual reproduction and mutation and variation, and genetic variation to be more exact, eukaryotes were able to, first of all, adapt to the changes of the environment to survive. If not, the environment would have been fatal to all of the known prokaryote cells. So maybe some prokaryote cells did die, but because of sexual reproduction, and you have genetic variation and mutation in the DNA structure, which allows specific organisms to survive in particular environments in which they have changed, that's how you have eukaryotes and prokaryotes. However, because of this mutation, they don't produce offsprings as quickly. So I'm not so sure that with the cells you can actually say if there is a male or a female. You actually really can't. So this is more what was happening asexually. Cells reproduce asexually, such as eukaryotes and prokaryotes. So I really wish you would have taken time to actually read this, because many of her questions and doubts when trying to look at the first eukaryotes and how they were all single-celled would have been answered. So here's another section in which Ms. Megan Fox came over and explained in her little video tutorial with her bias. And I wanted to point out the 47 million years ago, since this was something that was puzzling her during her visit. And how did scientists know that 47 million years ago, Earth's barren landscape was turning green with plant life? Well, we have fossils. So there is a process specific to showing how someone can tell how old a rock is. So how do scientists determine the time of Earth and specific rocks and sediments? Well, through a process called radiometric dating. So uranium is inside each rock. So there is a specific amount of uranium in each specific rock that is contained inside of the sediment. Okay. And 1/2 of the uranium amount in that particular rock or fossil will turn into lead in 1 billion years, and this is called half-life. So we have the parent element, which is uranium, and then we have the daughter element, which is lead. So once you're able to figure out the half-life of the particular rock, so by half-life I mean the specific amount of lead inside the rock, you're able to sort of trace back and multiply that half-life to see how many years this particular rock is. So if half of the uranium to turn into lead takes 1 billion years, then 47 million years ago means that there was more than half of the uranium inside these particular fossils or sediments, and there is a 1% margin error, so this is a pretty good guess. It's not, I wouldn't say that it's something that was made up. It's scientifically proven with a hypothesis, and it's not done through deductive reasoning. So here we are in the section in which Miss Fox is talking about how it is impossible for these fish to have moved to land, I guess? Is that what she was saying? She said something about fins falling off and limbs growing, which I hope that that's not what she meant. But anyway, in terms of how fins, sort of animals who were in water and who sort of lived in water were able to sort of come up to land and travel is, I think, best reflected in this little diagram over here. So you have the fins at the top, and then you have some sort of 4 digitated limbs in the bottom, in the early tetrapod. And you can see that they basically have, in the same colors, the same type of bones, just in different structures and different size. The only ones that are missing are the digits, and that's why maybe she would have gotten confused about this. This happens through divergent evolution, and this is basically what someone would call homologous traits, right? And it means that different species adapted to different environments, but the same origins come from the same structure. So they have basically the same anatomical structure than we do in our hands. So, and one of the ways or sort of missing links or proofs that one can say about the limbs coming from fins to actual tetrapods, one can look at Tiktaalik right here. And although this is a reproduction of Tiktaalik, here is the actual bone. So we can probably understand why they recreated it into sort of model, so we could actually see what was happening. And here we have the humerus ulna and radius colored on the Tiktaalik's limbs. And this was discovered by Neil Shubin. He is the provost of the Field Museum in the Canadian Arctic, so it's not like this is nobody that you wouldn't think is somebody. He has a TV series. You should probably watch it. And here again, just to prove a little bit more that fins and tetrapods, they do have similar bone structure in large scale. And no, these are not dinosaurs. I promise you, dinosaurs do not exist. And Harry Potter is a fictional story.